Hi, everyone. So this talk comes from several years of working as a consultant with startups and companies, going to dozens and dozens of events where I've seen company founders talk about their business, and seeing sort of the same memes sort of repeat themselves all, again and again. This kind of idea that sort of technology is at the core of what we do, and sort of seemingly design is sort of playing second fiddle. So this talk is really sort of my sort of answer to that. Imagine you're designing something brand new that's never existed before, like these Death Star. And it's solving a particularly annoying problem, in this case, the Rebel Scum. You don't really care what it looks like or how efficiently it is designed. You just want that problem to go away. And we see this lack of design concern in many, many early products. Like these early electric hairdryers, like these electric curlers, and like this device for curing Victorian ladies of hysteria. Very little thought has gone into the usability and the comfort of these devices. They've mostly been seen as engineering problems. Now, in the rush to market, many of these products contain critical flaws. For instance, like the hair curler's tendency to set their clients on fire. Now, the difficulty is, despite these flaws, there'll always be a few early adopters. Thank you. Folks that are willing to sit and fill in an online form for 45 minutes to get access to a PHP library. In fact, I'd imagine most of the people in this audience are kind of early adopters. The kind of people that don't really care what the product looks like or how they look when they're using the product. They're just getting it because they want the functionality. Now, the danger is, if you're one of these companies, you have this massive rush of early adopters. You can think you've nailed the product. You've scored big. However, over time, less forgiving users will start to use your product. And they'll start to notice all the little annoyances. They'll notice that your product is ugly. They'll notice that it's confusing. And if you've ever tried to buy a ticket on the Tokyo subway, it's just impossible to do. It's really difficult. And if you're not careful, it's game over for any burgeoning startup or product. Because what will happen is someone will come on, somebody younger and smarter than you, and they'll try and outdo you. Now, initially, when I picked this slide, it was kind of meant to be a joke. I spoke at a conference called The Next Web a couple of months ago, giving this talk. There were 2 CEOs under the age of 13 who were also presenting at the same conference. So it kind of made me feel really sorry for all the 25-year-olds in the audience who were basically over the hill. It's crazy. And what these guys do initially is they try and outdo you on the engineering front. They try and make the product that you made smaller. They try and make it faster. And they pack it full of lots of really engaging features, like an interactive tablet on the front of a fridge. Now, incidentally, the only reason I can see why people are putting kind of connected devices on fridges is because the cost of Wi-Fi units and tablets have come down so low in comparison to the cost of the fridge that it's kind of cheaper, kind of almost just to slap it on, just to see if anyone will use it. It's kind of reminiscent of the 80s when everything seemed to have a little LCD kind of clock in it. I don't know if you remember that. It's a classic case of design being driven by features and requirements rather than by kind of what's desirable or usable or useful. Now, competing on technology is fine for a while. However, over time, what will happen is the engineering advances, like this clock, will stop being compelling. And very quickly, your must-have product will just be another commodity. And when this happens, unfortunately, you'll suddenly find yourself in the manufacturing business, not the innovation business. And frankly, it's a shitty business to be in. Because there's really terrible margins. You just pump out product after product, kind of with little idea of quality, and you just hope that somebody will come along and buy it. Now, fortunately, this is the point where most companies start thinking about design. This is partly due to pressure from other competitors. Suddenly, people start inching forward. We start seeing these marginal improvements. Partly, it's down to customer demand. The customers have got bored of the products, and they want to get something slightly better. Partly it's just down to design trends. Design trends change. The interesting thing to me is what you're watching now is 100 years of product innovation of those first 3 products you saw. And it's kind of weird that, particularly in the female market, everything eventually seems to be gold-plated. This last item in particular is gold-plated, and it has an integral USB drive. I've got no idea what you're going to do with a USB drive in a device like this, but there we go. If you know what it is, look it up on the internet. The problem you guys are facing is you don't have 100 years to innovate. You've got 3, maybe 4 years at best. You've got to cram 100 years of innovation into an incredibly tight timeline. That's really tough. Now, when most people think about design, they think about the surface-level appearances, the aesthetics. And indeed, that's a really important aspect of design. After all, you can really drive delight and engagement and desirability by having a beautiful product, a beautiful-looking product. And it can set you apart from the competition. I think a classic example of this is something like Beats headphones. It's a really, really competitive market. And it was really fragmented until one company came along and decided that we're going to build a brand based purely around design. And in a space of about 18 months, they cornered a market that was really sort of considered impenetrable through design alone. Interestingly, most audiophiles would say that technically this is an inferior product, but it didn't seem to matter. And I see lots of startups focusing far too much on the technology without focusing on the design and the desirability. And it amazes me how few digital products really care about brand. However, aesthetics will only take you so far, as anyone who's tried to make juice out of Philip Stark's Juicy Salif juicer will tell you. It's great as a piece of sculptural work, but as a juicer, you get more juice on the floor and on your arms than you do in the actual cup. So good design alone, or good aesthetics alone, isn't going to take you all the way. Good design really, to me, is about how something behaves when it's in use. Now, unfortunately, I see a lot of new products that are coming out looking like this. They've been designed or mandated by a super user. That could be your MD, that could be your editor, that could be your CTO or head of marketing. They know the domain so well. They know all the little buttons and sort of little features that the clients must absolutely want. And so they pack it full of features. And it ends up looking like this. And your super users, your early adopters, might kind of love this. However, for most people, most ordinary people, this is intimidating. If you're a rally car driver, you want to simulate what it's like to be a rally car driver, this is probably the best kind of console controller you can get. But for most people, they're scared of technology. So one of the benefits of good design is to take that which is complicated and make it simple, easy to use, and delightful. And this will help you cross the chasm. This will help you bring products into new markets that you might have found really, really difficult to penetrate. Because people just want products that work seamlessly. However, no matter how good a designer you are, no matter how good a design team you are, what you thought sounded good on the drawing board, when you put it into the hands of your users, they do really strange and unexpected things with them. And so it's really important to actually realize this, that no piece of design survives contact with the enemy, that you have to, really, really early on, put your technology in the hands of the users. And I know the lean people will say to do that, what you need to do is you need to throw out prototypes really quickly, every couple of days, continuous deployment. I think the UX people would say you need to kind of develop an obsessive understanding of your users. You need to kind of be that product manager that wants to go out and talk to your users and put things in their hand and see how it works and see how it is used. And I think that's one of the jobs that you guys need to do because realistically, product managers are the champions of the users. You've got business, you've got technology putting all their demands on you, and you're the ones that need to stand out there and say, no, we need to do this for the benefit of the users. And so just simple things like running regular usability tests, continued deployment, all this kind of stuff. If you're still not sure what good design looks like, then Dieter Rams has his 10 principles of design. I'm not going to run through them all individually. They all kind of make sense. It's worth going online to kind of see what they are. But very few of them actually talk about the aesthetics, although that is important. There's a lot of other aspects of good design. For me, I think good product design and good product managers are like your favorite TV detective. It's their job to gather all the evidence, to post it up on the wall, and to start to spot patterns. And the truth and the beauty of the product comes through from this kind of sifting. Bad designers and bad product people are the lazy detectives you see that kind of just collar the first person that looks vaguely like they're going to be dodgy and kind of puts them behind bars. And you guys need to be the sort of the Sarah Lunds out there. You need to go out there and try and constantly push forward and push for more and make sure you get the perfect solution. And frankly, your desktops and your areas where you and your design team work should really look like a murder's happened. Because if they're not, you're not putting the effort in. If your designers have a lovely little pristine desk space, rather than a massively messy space like this, they're doing it wrong. So you guys need to build that culture. You need to be designing in the open. You need to kind of be having this outwelling of design in sort of everywhere, over your walls, over the floors. This is what good design looks like, and it's messy. And also, one of the reasons for doing this is because most people don't understand design. And they just think design is something that happens in a computer. Like, it's the 25-year-old in the corner that's the designer. Whereas actually design is something that happens out in the open and involves everybody. Now, designers have built up a kind of a lexicon of tools, as Kenneth said. And one of them, one of my favorites, is the Carnot model, as I think Kelly mentioned. And I'll kind of give you a brief description of the Carnot model because I think it's useful. So you've got these sort of three curves based on an axis: customer satisfaction and kind of complexity or cost. And a lot of products are just basic expectations that you have to get or else the product's going to be a flop. So for instance, I'm staying in a hotel tonight. If there wasn't a bed in the hotel, it's an epic fail. However, if there are 2 beds or 3 beds or 4 beds, it isn't really going to make my stay that much better if I'm on my own. So there's a whole bunch of things that you need to have there, but adding more, bigger quality isn't going to make a huge difference. Then you've got these performance payoff, these linear things, whereas the more you add, the better. So for instance, if I go into a hotel room and they've got a really big flat panel display, that's better than having a really small flat panel display. And you can constantly keep upping these performance payouts. And it costs more, but you kind of get this sort of linear relationship. But the thing that interests me, and the thing that interests most designers, are these excitement generators. And it's things like this that always get me excited. Now, I show this slide in every talk I give because it's a really cheap joke, but these are the kind of things that will not appear on a Kanban board. These are the kind of things that will not appear on some kind of spreadsheet of features and functionality. These are the kind of things, these nice little touches, that will get killed and squashed and snuffed out of your product in favor of an extra feature, an extra sprint. And I think it's our job as designers, and I think it's your job as product managers, to nurture these beautiful little delighters, to make sure that your products actually have some life and some personality. There's a couple of companies that do this really well. Zappos is one of them, and if you haven't read the book that Tony Hsieh wrote, I think it's really, really worth reading as a product manager. Another company that I really like that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with is Mailchimp. And if the speakers are looking for a really good speaker, I suggest getting Aaron Walters because he's really good. This is a company that basically sells a really boring product for boring people. It's for marketers, for sending emails. How dull can that be? But they've created something that this community loves. They're so enamored by Mailchimp. Not only do they have all these cutesy little landing pages, like you log in and they have little jokes and little kind of quips. And what it means is everyone kind of like, when they're using this service, they're really excited about logging in and playing with this product. And I put the obligatory kind of Seth Godin quotes, because I think, again, if you guys haven't read any Seth Godin, you should, because he's very, very applicable to product management. And a lot of what he talks about is basically subverting the usual logic that you create a really cheap product and then spend lots of money to market it. And what you should actually do is try and channel as much of your marketing spend into building a great product as possible. It kind of seems like a no-brainer, and yet I see company after company making the same mistake. In fact, it's a mistake that the guys at Dropbox did when they first launched. When Dropbox first launched, they were spending between $233 and $388 per user on pay-per-click sort of acquisition for a product that cost $100. Now, it doesn't take a genius to see that this is not a sustainable business model. You're paying more to get customers than customers are paying. So they thought about it, and they realized that if they put all of their marketing spend on just building a product that was really delightful to use, they'd hit the nail on the head. And obviously, we know the history. They've built something amazing. And a lot of people would look at it and go, yeah, but that's not design. It's not pretty. But it's usable, and it's functional, and it fits in with your day-to-day life. And that's the complete definition of creating a delightful user experience. So what you guys need to be doing is to be building products that consumers love. Now, and think about it. How often do you get emails from people saying, I love your product so much, it fits into a huge part of my life? This is what you need to be aiming for. And frankly, unless you're building developer tools like libraries for PHP or GitHub, which is awesome, by the way, but unless you're building tools for developers, if you're building tools for any kind of consumer or business, you need designers at the heart of that process. Because when you have designers, what you end up with is something like Nest, which has been talked about before today. It's kind of the marrying of all these kind of things. It's beautiful form, it's great function, it's usable, it learns, but it's incredibly difficult to do. And I think this is the key. Now, if you study an MBA, one of the first things you learn about business is when you're building a product, you need to build a defensible product, a product that's incredibly hard to copy. Now, I think, in the early days, technology was really tough to copy. But now we've got so many web services out there, we've got people like Amazon, you can spool up a new product really, really quickly. And I think design is becoming that unique differentiator, because design is really hard to copy. It takes time, and it takes money, and it takes investment, and it takes mistakes to create really good design. It's not something you do quickly on a budget to wrap around this great technical platform that you spent millions of pounds building. But as I said, it's very difficult. Lots of companies over the years have really tried to use design to differentiate their product, and most of them have failed. And you're seeing this in lots of Me Too clones in the consumer market. Apple will do something, and then 3 months later, every other product looks like an Apple product. But you can tell that they're not genuine. And as consumers, we're not stupid. We see that it's not quite as good as the thing that is genuinely good, that's got genuinely thought about it. So you can't just be a fast follower. You need to actually be focusing your design budget on design. But even when you do this, companies like Nokia have invested hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds in design. They have R&D people and researchers like Jan Chipchase going into the wilds of Africa to understand the ethnographic kind of nature of people's relationship with technology. And they come up with these really great ideas. And I've spoken to loads of Nokia engineers that, when I've spoken about this great new feature that's been on an Apple iPhone, they'll kind of like shrug and be embarrassed and said, yeah, we kind of designed that 4 years ago, but our product managers or our managers wouldn't let us put it in the product because they didn't have confidence over it. And so it's really important to make sure that not only do you allow the research and the thinking to happen, but you have the confidence to trust the judgment of your team to put these features and functions in. But as I say, it's tough. So how do you compete on design effectively? Well, the first thing you need to do is hire good designers. But if you're not a designer, it's really difficult to tell what the quality is. So what most people do, companies and startups, they go to Dribble or they go to a graduate degree show, they'll find a young 18, 20, 21-year designer that's making really pretty looking things, they'll hire them and say, you're the head designer, you're maybe even the creative director, go and make things amazing. Do that design thing that I don't really understand. And then what they do is they go away and they create what you've told them to build. That's not a designer, that's a stylist. Somebody who is good at mimicking the styles of other people, the current design trends, and iterating them back. And if you're in a marketing or a promo sort of advertising sort of world, you're doing things really, really fast, maybe you need a stylist. But if you're solving real problems, you need problem solvers. You need real designers. Incidentally, I think this guy is great. This guy is from a TV show called Hair Battle Challenge. They do things like making the Eiffel Tower of hair. I kind of think things like colour are pretty much the Eiffel Tower of hair apps. It looks pretty, but it really is badly designed, even though it looks nice. Now, sadly, a lot of startups and a lot of companies make a real, I think, critical mistake. They hire juniors because they've got a really short runway and think that, well, we'll get a junior designer in, and then once the product's a success, we'll hire the better people. And I actually think that's the wrong way round to look at it. Because what happens is, as that runway or that delivery date kind of comes closer and closer, and you're not happy with the product, it becomes too late to get the experts in. Whereas actually, I think if you hire good designers from the outset, they can set the groundwork, they can do really good design work, and then they can hand it over to the juniors, and the juniors can take it on and move it forward. So I think a lot of these people feel they're gaming the system, but they're actually not. I've come across lots of startups that 3, 4, 5 years down the line are exactly where they are when I sort of first met them, because they've hired one mediocre designer, they've worked for them for 6 months or a year, they hire a slightly less mediocre designer, and by the time they've actually realized that they need someone good, it's kind of too late and they've fallen off the edge of the runway. So my advice basically is hire the best designers you can afford, because they really are worth the money. And if you can't, because basically what you're needing is, you're not needing stylists, you're needing kind of design thinkers. You're needing people that can solve problems in a creative way. And these kind of people can add a huge amount of value really, really early on in the process. These designers can be quite hard to find. So if you're a startup, I think it's a really good idea to try and find design co-founders. And if you're in a business, I think you should be looking for some kind of design seat at the board. I always find it really weird that we have CTOs in charge of technology at a board level, but very rarely do we have CXOs. Really rarely do we have heads of customer experience or designers at the board. And if you want to kind of build a culture of design, you kind of need those senior people. Now, I think having design co-founders and even CXOs is becoming more and more common. And in fact, some of the biggest startup success stories of late have been, designer-founded companies, companies like Kickstarter. There's actually books out there all about kind of designer-led companies. And the quality really shows. And one of the reasons I think of having design really early on in the process as a co-founder, as a CXO, is a lot of the tricky design decisions actually happen before you've even started really kind of opening Photoshop or doing any of that kind of stuff. Business models are a design problem. And designers are really, really great at helping facilitate that. And if it's too late, if you bring the designers in once all the core business problems have been solved, then you've already baked in some problems which usually probably can't be sort of rectified by then. You're just kind of putting lipstick on a pig. Now, I really think that the lean startup world has been really, really good for designers. Frankly, because lean startups have been saying to the business people what designers have been saying for the last 20 years. You need to get out of the building, you need to go and talk to users, you need to run short, tight iterations, you need to get feedback, you need to know what you're doing wrong and learn. And so it's lovely now that finally I have bosses of large companies coming back to me and reiterating the stuff that we've been saying and banging our heads against a brick wall for years. And it's great that we've got products and companies like Luxor opening up that are trying to teach design to kind of tech teams and startups. And if you guys, don't have that kind of like design chops in your company, you should definitely go out and look at some of these programs for encouraging design thinking. Things like Code Academy, for instance. However, I think one of the downsides for me of the lean startup movement is this fixation, if not fetishization, of data, of analytics. I see far too many companies justifying the fact they don't have designers because, we can just A/B test it. Now, you can A/B test certain things, but you can't really A/B test full designs. You don't really know if you're choosing between two designs and they're really vastly different. Actually, what the differences are, because it might be 50 things on one design are really good and 40 are bad, and the other way around on the other design, because they're really complex systems. So I liken managing your company and your design process using analytics like driving by only looking at your sat-nav. Sat-navs are really, really useful tools, but if you don't look out the window occasionally, this is going to happen. This is a lorry in Lincolnshire that was only looking at its sat-nav, went down this tiny turn, got stuck, basically screwed. The use of analytics is great for testing assumptions and optimizing existing experiences. It's really, really terrible for design. And if you're following data blindly, then you're doing the wrong thing. The other benefit, I think, of having a strong design leadership in a company is that it helps build design culture. A lot of the startup talks I've seen have CTOs talking about like how they're able to hire great developers. And they hire great developers because they've created a place where developers want to work. They have all the great tools that developers love. They have the culture. They have the football tables. But this is great. But if you're trying to attract designers into a culture that doesn't feel like it's a design-led culture, it's a tech culture, you're going to come up to problems. Having someone in the leadership that can create a culture as strong as a tech culture for designers is really important. Because most good designers won't go to a company if they think there's no culture there, if they think that the people don't care about design. Which is why you're seeing designers flocking to startups, flocking to San Francisco. A lot of the best people I know in the industry have left the country because they can't find the opportunities to make a difference here. And I see people going and joining large companies that get really frustrated after a year because they're not allowed to do their job. And why would you hire someone that's really good at what they do and then not give them the opportunity to do it for you? It's crazy. So this culture thing is really important. On the other hand, I'm not a designer that lives in an ivory tower. I don't think design is just a preserve of one person. Design is a team sport, much like bug fixing. Bug fixing isn't just the job of your quality assurance team. It's the job of everyone. It's everyone's job to pick up the trash when they see it. The same is true of design. It's everyone's responsibility. And what we're seeing now is designers and product managers are becoming less about the day-to-day work and more about facilitators. It's your job to get up there and to tell the stories, to justify the decisions, to coax out the biases and the irrationalities of your clients and your customers and set the context for which design happens. It doesn't mean you have to be opening Photoshop. It doesn't mean you have to be sketching, but you're facilitating in that process. And so you kind of need to integrate design throughout your entire company. And frankly, you just need to hire the best people possible and have a good designer directing activities. And I think Silicon Valley are wise to this. You're seeing, lots of acqui-hires now. I've had 2 friends in the last 18 months whose agencies have been hired or bought basically by Facebook and Google purely for the design talent, which would have been unheard of 3-4 years ago. 3-4 years ago, they were only hiring developers. So anyway, I'm going to leave you basically on the 3 things that I think that startups and companies need to do. Realize design adds value, build a culture of design within your organization, and hire the best designers you can afford as early as you can afford them. Thank you very much.